Corporate inversions are when United States companies buy foreign corporations so that they can shift their corporate headquarters in order to avoid taxes in the United States and put their costs overseas. As a result, we affirm the resolution. The United States Congress should pass House Res 4679 to stop the Stop Corporate Inversions Act of 2014. First, some framework. Policy net benefit is the best criterion for the debate, as it allows both the teams access to predictable burdens and methods of refutation. On to the plan. The United States Congress will pass House Res 4679 to the Stop Corporate Inversion Act of 2014. Not of the solvency. The first argument under the solvency is that Obama is going to agree to this. He will sign it into law. He has been calling corporate inverters corporate deserters of the United States. He has taken a very hardline stance against this because he believes that these are corporations that exploit the United States economy while simultaneously not contributing to the communities from which they draw their profits. So Obama is going to be very willing to sign this into office. He's been calling for changes to this program in the past. The second argument under the solvency is that right now the law states that any company that has 20% of their corporate holdings outside of the United States does not have to pay taxes within the United States, and that this change under House Res 4679 would shift the burden to 50%. So it would go up by 2.5 times. Any corporation who had more than half of their corporate holdings in the United States would be required to pay taxes to the United States, rather than the old burden of a fifth. Thus, Advantage 1. Advantage 1 is jobs. My ISA point is the uniqueness. The first argument here is that jobs are decreasing in the status quo. The little a is that labor force participation was at 62.8% at the last indicator, which is the lowest that it's been in 36 years, meaning that there are 96 million individuals in the United States who are currently unemployed as a result of their inability to find work. The little b argument under this is that as of September 15th, unemployment applications were up to by 12,000 over the 2-week period prior. And the little c argument is that according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the U6 unemployment rate was at 12%, meaning that 12% of individuals are currently seeking work but unable to find it. The BISA point is the link. The first argument is that businesses are no longer able to outsource because it would become an ineffective strategy to shift greater than 50% of their corporate holdings outside of the United States. This puts such a large burden to delocate their corporate holdings from the US that they wouldn't be able to maintain their actual corporate operations. The reason this works right now is because with just 20%, they're able to establish some amount of business in other countries and put their corporate headquarters there, and that is enough to meet the burden. But moving more than half of your business outside of the United States means that you aren't accessing enough of your inside of the US business to get access to maintaining your operations. Thus, the CISA point are the impacts. The first argument is that individuals are, as a result, going to be able to keep their jobs because companies are no longer going to be running their jobs overseas. This is going to be able to resolve structural poverty in the United States. The little a argument under this is that unemployment benefits don't provide enough to cover people's needs, that even individuals who are on food stamps frequently go hungry because there simply isn't enough to provide for themselves and for their family. The little b argument here is that people are forced to make choices between basic things like having food or having power to heat their home, meaning that in the winter months in particular, people face difficult decisions about which part of their life they wish to give up. The little c is that this leads to starvation in the streets for many individuals. Once you lose access to your home and you are put into a position of homelessness, it is near impossible to escape this through things like not being able to shower before job interviews or not being able to bring enough dress clothes with you to be able to interview for jobs. Very simple things that we would normally take for granted become out of the reach of these individuals. The little d is that this type of poverty becomes invisible as cities force these individuals out of public eyes. You rarely see homeless people in public areas in most large cities in the United States because there are ordinances against things like sleeping on the streets in San Francisco, which forces these individuals to find hiding places, literally making their poverty invisible. The little e is that as a result, these individuals die earlier and they live less fulfilled lives. When individuals are dying as a result of a lack of nutrition or basic health problems that arise from not having access to health care or having access to basic necessities like clean water and food, then these individuals will necessarily live a shorter life.
There's also direct violence against these people. People start putting like spikes in their doorways so people can't sleep there.
Right, there's also direct violence against these individuals through things like spikes placed in doorways so that homeless individuals don't have the ability to sleep there, and homeless individuals are more likely to be targets of sexual violence or of physical violence while on the streets because that is less likely that they will have any recourse. So individuals who wish to participate in that type of violence target these individuals necessarily. Now, advantage 2, that of the environment. My ASA point is the uniqueness. The first argument here is that corporations are leaving the United States now. You can look specifically to the corporate deserters that President Obama describes, but also to corporations like Peterson, who recently left the United States in late 2013 to relocate to a lower tax bracket. The visa point is the link. The first argument is that the plan text will pass. The second argument here is that the United States environmental protections are higher than those of other nations, meaning that we have an ability to regulate through things like the EPA, the environmental destruction that is created through industry, which leads us to the CISA point, which are impacts. The first impact here is going to be both deforestation and pollution as a result of corporate relocation. The little A argument that you can look to is Monsanto in Brazil, who uses cut and clear techniques in order to establish large corporate farms that would not be allowed in the United States as a result of deforestation regulations, but moreover, they're able to dump chemicals to support the crops that wouldn't be allowed in the United States. I'm sorry, I'm in protected time, meaning that they don't have access if they were in the United States, but as a result of their corporate delocation have the ability to participate in these business practices. The little B argument under here is that these practices poison people and kill off the natural habitats that are crucial to supporting the wildlife in those regions, which necessarily leads to shorter lifespans for individuals there, but especially for individuals who grow their own food in those areas, because as the habitat falls apart, the crops that they are accustomed to growing no longer have the supporting species that would otherwise prop up their crops. Yes, Lord.
This also affects indigenous populations.
Right, this particularly affects indigenous populations who are particularly reliant on growing their own crops. This means that this leads to the little C impact, is that this leads to the death of both humans and animals in these areas, or the shortening of their lives. Whether it's direct death or death from disease later on, these individuals will not live as long as they otherwise would. Slipped over and almost hit the ground. It'll be fun to watch on video later.
Right. It's going to be 2 off case in order. I'm going to go with the plan text, solvency, background, advantage 1 on businesses, and advantage 2 on the environment. Cool? Everyone ready?
See.
On to the first disadvantage of politics. On the 8th point of the uniqueness, our first uniqueness point is that we say that the Democrat Senate majority that exists now is unlikely to happen after midterms because, according to Nate Silver, the GOP will win back the Senate. Just yesterday, September 25th, 538 said that the GOP is likely to win 57.5% probability of winning the control of the Senate. Our second point is that we say this because the GOP is most likely to get 46 easy seats. Therefore, they only need 6 seats to surpass the Democrats. They are going to get these seats from Alaska, Arkansas, Louisiana, Kansas, Kentucky, and Georgia. We say that Colorado is also slipping to a GOP win. Our third point is that we say that the GOP is going to win for 3 reasons. One, midterm elections are really, really bad for presidential parties, meaning it's bad for the Democrats. Our second point is that we say that the current contest states this year are states that Obama almost lost more than won in his presidential election. And our third point is that we said that because there's a poor economy, undecided voters are going to vote Republican. On the links, plan passes. We say that this specific plan, HR 4679, is supported by a majority of Democrats. This plan is going to mean that Democrats are going to win the Senate because this is going to be seen as, 1, a Democratic win. Our second point is that we say that this Democratic win allows Obama to not talk about border securitization, meaning that our second point in the internal links is that immigration is at the top of the docket after midterms. We say that Boehner will pass whatever Obama wants because he wants what's good for the economy. Our third point is that we say that because Obama's legacy, he has to pass immigration. However, if the Democrats win the seats, they will pass immigration without border security. We say that a GOP win is going to add 10,000 extra border patrols on the border, on the impacts, we say that GOP immigration reform is key for solving sex trafficking. We give the example of Defensores de Cristo, which is a sex trafficking group on the border that has led to things like prostitution, where 20,000 million females have been violated in this region. We say that we're going to solve back for that. Our second point is that we say that GOP is also key to stopping border violence. When we see the cartels like the Zetas and the Sinaloa causing more violence, where 1 million people have already died from border violence, we can solve back for this. Also, we say that hard drugs, there's just going to be an increase in hard drugs if the Democrats win and we don't do border security, leading to more poverty, leading to more malnutrition. We are never solving back for that. I'll get you to the bottom of this position. On to disadvantage 2. Corporate inversion, bad.
Corporate inversion, good.
Good, right. Corporate inversion, good. On to the 8 point of the uniqueness. Our first, the uniqueness point is that we say that corporations are currently inverting. We give the examples of companies such as Pfizer, Carnival, and Medtronic, which is a medical company who creates,
Who creates medical technology.
Right, who creates medical technologies, and they're actually helping solve back for the cost. Our little B into this is we say that because these companies have moved to different areas, they have allowed for lower costs, which has helped people in poverty in particular. Look at where Pfizer has decreased the amount we pay for pharmaceuticals, meaning that that's actually solving. Our second point under the uniqueness is food operators. We say that food operators are currently they're really they're on the margins. We say that this is simply because we see an increase in food prices, meaning that the only way they can decrease food prices is by moving their corporations to other areas. On the links. Our first point is that we see that if this plan passes, they're going to be forced to stay in the United States. Our second point is that they're going to have to pay corporate taxes, which is 50%. We see that
35%.
Which is 35% of their taxes. We see that is simply going to increase the amount of money that they have to pay to the federal government, meaning that this is going to cut jobs because corporations are not going to want to hire as many people if they're going to have to pay so much taxes. On the impact level, look, we say that this is going to lead to our impact by evading this is going to lead to a decrease in jobs. We say that cutting jobs is particularly bad because you are simply linking into your impacts faster because you're leading to more poverty in the United States. Our second point is that we say that these company taxes are also going to be bad because, look, our second impact point is that we say that they are going to evade these corporate taxes by raising prices, meaning that they are going to increase the prices of their product, meaning that companies like Pfizer and Medtronic aren't going to be able to have those affordable prices for people in poverty. We say that this is particularly harmful because when the affirmative talks about whether we should afford our medical bills or our food, we say that with their plan passing, this is going to affect both aspects, medical and food aspects. We say that the only way to solve back this is by not passing the affirmative plan. Anything you want to add on that?
It leads to more malpractice.
Right. Also, on the issue of the medical impact, we said that this also leads to more malpractice because when right. This is going to be bad for the food industry particularly because this is going to increase code violations because when there are less people who are working in this area, meaning that this simply allows for the perpetuation of code violations when they are going to treat these people as less than other, and it also decreases our quality of our food. We say that quality of our food is equally important for those who are impoverished. Yes, your question.
What do you mean food operators?
So we give the example of food operators like Burger King, and we're saying these food operators that have these really big chains that help those impoverished. Any other examples? Yeah. All right.
Can I get a quick question on the first dissent? I'm a little confused.
Sure.
So to make sure I understand the story right, uniqueness, Democrats are going to lose now. The link is that Democrats will win, and then the internal link and impact is that now Republicans will pass immigration reform with border security?
No, we're saying that plan is by giving the Democratic wing, you don't allow the GOP to gain the Senate majority. We say that that's particularly harmful because the GOP is the only way we can solve back before border violence. On case. On to the issue of the solvency, were they say in their first solvency that Obama will agree to sign it into law. However, their plan uses the United States Congress, meaning that this essentially links into our disadvantage because when you have Congress passing anything, this is essentially going to link to a Democrat win. Also, cross-apply where it's majority Democrats. Also, to their second point, no, we'll get to that on advantage 1. Group together all of their uniqueness. They say the jobs are low in the status quo. However, we're going to argue that there's been an increase in jobs in this past September, which where we're actually solving back for unemployment, where we have where businesses and sectors that actually increased 47,000 jobs. We're actually solving back for that. They say that 996 million people are unemployed. However, this number is currently lower than it was before. Also, we on the links. They say that businesses aren't going to outsource. However, we're going to argue one by allowing these companies to pay the 35% corporate tax. In the United States, they're simply going to allow for a decrease in jobs to happen. We're going to say turn. This is never going to solve back for their impacts when they're simply going to decrease jobs and allow people to still go hungry and poverty. They're never solving back for starvation or poverty because if anything, they're making it happen worse. Corporations are greedy businesses who are not going, who are always going to prefer their prices and their own profit over consumer jobs. Also, they say that on the second link, they say that there's a large burden. Yes.
Even if they raise it to 50%, that means they move 50% of their businesses over there.
Right.
They still do.
Right. Even if they raise it to 50%, that means they are still going to move 50% of their business over there, meaning that they are still going to cause these problems, meaning that they are not solving back for anything on Advantage 2. On Advantage 2, look, the U.S. is still, this isn't going to solve back because they're still going to have businesses there. The deforestation thing, the status quo is simply going to continue because if you only have 20% needs to be in the United States, then big corporations are still going to link it to this environment and they're still going to cause these harms.
So the order is going to be Advantage 1, Advantage 2, and case, which is just going to straight down.
Sweet, thank you.
And I'm going to start my time. We're going to talk for a second, and then I'll go ahead and start. Okay?
I'm sorry?
We're going to talk for a second, and then I'll start my speech. I'm going to start the time,
Okay,
and then we're going to talk.
okay,
Okay.
okay,
Start. Okay?
sure.
Maybe answer right now, just as that. Okay. You have a couple of arguments? Your choice. Okay, I'd like to answer it just as it is. Okay. Starting off on the politics disadvantage, the first argument is that it is the non-unique, that Democrats are going to win the Senate in the status quo. The first argument here is that you can look to Senator Harry Reid, the Senate Majority Leader, has expressed that he is very confident that the Democrats are going to be able to retain the majority. The second argument here is you can look to the fact that key Democrats are ahead in specific states. You can look to places such as Colorado, Alaska, North Carolina, and Arkansas as specific areas in which Democrats are leading. These are four key seats that the Democrats are going to retain through the midterms. The third argument here is you can look to Democrats are outspending Republicans in the status quo. You can look to the fact that Republicans have raised $31 million currently, while Democrats have raised over $62 million. That means that Democrats are outspending their Republicans in the status quo. You can also look to the fact that this spending especially is key because in the past, 95% of the actual amount of candidates that have won have been the ones that have outspent, which means that this spending especially is key. This indicates that Democrats are going to retain the majority in the status quo, and their uniqueness arguments that Democrats will lose now do not apply. The second argument is going to be a couple of link turns. Our argument is that the plan is going to allow for the Republicans to win, and it means that they can pass a comprehensive border security bill. The first argument here is that this is a protectionist policy. You can look to the fact that in the past, Republicans have argued for things like protectionist policies to keeping jobs within America, while Democrats have largely argued for free trade. You can look to the fact that this means that the Republicans will be able to spin the plan as being a Republican win through the fact that this is within their existing platforms. This means that Republicans will win in the midterms. The second argument is that this means that Republicans can also show that they've broken the gridlock in Congress, that currently not many bills have gone through and they've largely taken the blame for it. That the passing of the affirmative plan that breaks this gridlock is going to mean that Republicans will be able to claim some support within the larger public. Additionally, you can look to the internal link level. They say that Boehner is going to be the House Majority Leader Boehner is going to be so happy he's going to pass whatever, and that he'll pass whatever Obama wants. This argument just doesn't make sense. Obama and Boehner have cooperated in the past, and there's no reason as to why Boehner is going to specifically pass this comprehensive immigration bill through the way that they talk about. Our argument here is that Boehner will always default into the Tea Party and specifically to his own party in order to pass their version of bills as opposed to what Obama is looking for, which means that there's no internal link story. There's no internal link story here. Additionally, you can look at the fact that they say that if the Democrats win, then they will be able to pass a comprehensive immigration reform without this border security. And I think I personally get a little confused here, but I'll try to answer as best I can. The response here is that Republicans are still going to be able to filibuster a non-comprehensive immigration bill. That they still will have all the protections and powers of a minority party. They will still have the ability to filibuster, and the Democrats won't be able to pass a patchwork immigration reform without it, which means that at best we're probably going to see no immigration reform. This is not going to happen anytime into the future. It means that the disadvantage is very improbable. Yes.
Their scenario only estimates 6 seats that the Republicans would win, but they would need to win 60 seats to be able to surpass.
Yes. Okay. The unique story that they are telling says that only 6 seats are going to win for them to be able to win a majority. But in order to be able to pass a comprehensive immigration bill that they talk about, they need to have a supermajority of 60, which there's no mathematical way for them to be able to claim, which means that Democrats are still going to go against things like border security under their story, which means there's no justification for this disadvantage ever happening. Good? On the disadvantage of inversion, good? The first argument they make is about how corporations are inversion, and they specifically isolate medical companies as moving overseas. Our argument here is that this is probably a really bad thing, that medical companies can move overseas and then be able to still sell their products. Our argument is you can look to things like drug safety and safety of medical practices. You can look to the FDA has a very, very strict process for the approval of these drugs, and if medical companies are able to just move abroad and be able to sell their same drugs in other places, it's going to be overall worse because it's going to allow for things like medical corporations to be able to cut costs and cut corners in order to be able to provide things like drugs at, yes, a lower cost, but it will be bad drugs that are not safe for those individuals. They'll be able to sell them abroad and make tons of money, but it's overall going to be worse. Our argument here is that you should keep these corporations in the United States where we have these very strict processes in order to be able to make sure that overall our drugs are safe and our actual prescriptions are safe. Additionally, you can look to the next set of arguments that they make is about food operators moving overseas. The first argument here is that you can't really move food production that far overseas. Like, food goes bad pretty quickly, and most of the food that is moved in the United States is by truck. You can't move that much overseas through airlines. It doesn't work like that. You can look at the fact that not only are food producers not going to move overseas, but this is also probably an argument about why it's better to keep food producers that are trying to move overseas within the United States. That when we have food that tries to be moved out to places like Brazil, maybe you can look to our case to the Advantage 2, where we talked to you about how Monsanto, a big food producer, has moved to Brazil and has utilized just cut some wide swaths of land in the Amazon in order to be able to create large corporate farms. This has overall been bad for the environment, and it's been bad for indigenous populations because they use things like chemicals such as Roundup that are very harmful, then cause things like diseases. This means that you should always be preferring keeping corporations in the United States in order to be able to prevent them from causing this violence and causing this disease and harm. Additionally, you can look to some of their link arguments. They say that corporate taxes are so high, which means that jobs are being lost. But you can look to the fact that corporations will only take that, and they'll take the money that they make off the tax change, and they'll keep as profit. There's no reason why they would decrease prices as a result of this, which means that there's no justification for how jobs are going to be saved by this. But additionally, you can look to our Advantage 1 where we tell you that jobs are being lost in the status quo, that jobs are being lost, they're decreasing. There's no justification as to how this current inversion policy of moving corporations overseas is creating jobs. You can look to the fact that the status quo is going the opposite way instead right now. Good. On case, on solvency. They don't really make many responses here. The only argument they make is that the plan uses Congress, which means that it links to the disadvantage. I don't think that that's a very good justification of a link. Just saying you use Congress, I think that just using Congress is not a reason as to why it's going to affect the midterms. You should look to all the answers that we've already placed on that disadvantage. But looking to advantage one, they say that jobs are increasing in the status quo, and as we've seen a 47,000 increase, and look at the fact that no, unemployment applications were this week increased by 12,000, and that the overall labor force participation rate, which is the actual measure, is the lowest it has been in 36 years. This indicates that a lot of individuals, I'm sorry, I don't have time for your question, are not being able to get access to jobs in the status quo, and that your unemployment figures are not accurate. But additionally, you say that the high corporate tax rate is what is decreasing jobs. No, the money that you can look at the fact that things like corporate tax loopholes are resolving this, and their actual tax rate is probably close to like 16-17%, as what most studies have indicated, which means that all of your arguments about taxes hurting jobs just are not true. But additionally, you can go to our advantage two very quickly. They make arguments about how corporations are still there. This is not the argument. The ability for corporations to move overseas is what is the lack of disruption to the environment and you should prefer the environment.
All right, we're gonna go advantage two on top.
Okay.
Advantage one of jobs.
Okay.
Disadvantage two of the corporate inversion. And disadvantage one of politics.
Awesome.
Alrighty.
So it's reverse order.
Yeah, we're going.
Yeah, actually,
It
it is.
is. Oh, wow.
I'm totally backwards.
I do that sometimes. No? Everyone ready? Okay. Look, this is going to be an easy vote for Team Carmen Miranda for a couple of reasons. First, when they drop Carmen's analysis on advantage 2 and on advantage 1 when they fundamentally misundercover the terms. Additionally, go to advantage 2. The only argument Corey makes here is that they are going to stop corporations from moving. However, if you look to the exact text of the plan, they only mean that they have to increase. They can still move if but they're increasing the rate to 50%. That means corporations would have to move 50% of their businesses overseas if they wish to do this, which means corporations will probably still do this. And that's where you're not solving back for advantage 2. Drop to their uniqueness. They say corporations are leaving the United States in like 2013. This is not unique. It's already happening. On the issue of the links, they say that the U.S. environment has higher regulations than other nations. However, Carmen drops the analysis that we are still one of the largest polluters in the world. Even with these regulations, probably means there's no solvency. Additionally, on the impacts, they bring in the analysis about Monsanto and how they've moved to Brazil. However, this is more than 20% of their business, Monsanto's business is in Brazil. It's much over 50% when they're increasing the deforestation. It's not just their corporate headquarters, it's their business. Additionally, point 2 probably means they don't solve back for this with plan because other corporations are going to send more than 50% of their business, which 3 turn only probably means you lead to an increase in things like this happening when you're leading to more corporations who are probably still going to have corporate flight in the United States as their uniqueness claims, probably means that more corporations are going to move more of their businesses than just 20%, which means you're seeing more environmental degradation around the world. Advantage 1, jobs. Look, on the analysis, he just does not handle Carmen's analysis well enough. Carmen specifically tells you in September, in September, the United States increased jobs by 47,000 jobs created in the United States this month alone. Kari Kant says that unemployment is up by 2,000 applications. However, this does not mean that people don't have a job to go to, as capitalism requires that some people are going to be out of work. It's inevitable. Additionally, point 2, we are still increasing jobs, which probably means the economy is really high right now. Additionally, drop down to the links. They say that they are going to solve back for this because they close corporate loopholes, which means that, and additionally their second point to this, as Corey analyzes, is that corporate taxes are only 16 or 17%. This is completely not true. 1, corporate taxes are at 35% in the United States. That's why companies are leaving. Additionally, point 2, they argue that quote, closing the loopholes is what solves. However, they still allow a loophole. The companies just have to move more of their businesses. Problem means they don't sell back for advantage 2. Additionally, you can extend Carmen's term, which goes drop, where you are the internal link to collapsing jobs. Because either 1A, companies are going to move 50% of their or more of their businesses overseas, which means that this is more than just their corporate headquarters, or B, you lead to an increase in prices and an increase for these companies who stay to increase the money they have to pay. 35% of corporate taxes means that they're going to lead to layoffs in order to cover those fees. Additionally, that means they don't get any access to their impacts about poverty or structural poverty. Carmen and I are the only one controlling the link to the impacts. Anything else, Carmen? There's no way to vote for the Aff on the advantages. Disadvantage 2 of corporate inversions act. Go to the uniqueness level. Corey states on his point 1 that it's probably bad that these corporations are moving their drugs over because the FDA needs to approve these new drugs and that we are selling drugs abroad and not in the United States. However, this is completely false. Corporations are moving their corporate headquarters. That is all we're talking about now, is their ability to put their headquarters, which is only needs to be 20% of their businesses, overseas so they don't pay these taxes. That's what Pfizer has done. That's what all these other medical corporations, Metatron has done, is they're moving just their headquarters, which means Corey's analysis about selling drugs without FDA approval is completely false, especially when the United States has to approve any drug that's sold in the US. Additionally, on the issue point of 3, he tries to specifically say that if we move overseas, we're going to have more things like Brazil. Plan is the only way you lead to more things like Brazil, because there will still be corporate flight. It's just going to be at 50% now. Probably means you lead to destructions of environment. On the issue of the links, he tries to say that these companies are keeping the profit and cross-apply the jobs being lost in the scope. However, cross-apply Carmen's analysis about 1, jobs increasing in the scope, and 2, even if the companies are keeping it for profit, if you're forcing them to stay here to pay that 35% tax increase, if we're both agreeing corporations are greedy, then that means they're going to cut jobs. Probably means you still lead to poverty. And those are impacts. You lead to cutting jobs, you lead to poverty, you lead to more code violations, because places like Burger King are on the margins. Probably means they're going to have more people working more amount of shifts. Probably means you're going to lead to more people with health issues, more people who are going to be pushed onto the periphery, and this is going to be really bad. Anything else, Carmen? Okay, disadvantage 1 of politics. First, just an overview. You're going to be preferring Carmen and I's 1, warranted out analysis, and 2, updated analysis. All our uniqueness points are updated as of yesterday, or the 25th, as of yesterday and this morning. This is a big deal. First, Corey tries to say non-unique Dems Harry Reid is confident. Of course he's going to say he's confident. He's the head of the Senate majority. No one's going to be like, oh, well, we're not going to win. Like, that's just silly. On advantage 2, he says that Democrats are controlling Colorado and Alaska. However, this is completely false, as we give you the analysis just as September 25th, 57.5%, 548. We report that GOP will win 57.5% of the seats. They are going to win the majority. You can cross-apply the other states that are already winning, and as of yesterday, Colorado actually slipped from the Democrat and is in the hands of the Republican right now. Republicans will win. On the issue of the links, they say that they're going to allow for, this is a protectionist policy, and Dems are all about free trade. However, this policy, as Carmen gives the analysis, is about increasing corporate taxes, and this is a Democrat-supported policy. This is not for Republicans. The 2-point, Republicans don't want to piss off businesses. When they do, this means that you will see a swing in the favor for Democrats, which means if Democrats win, you don't get the analysis to increasing border militarization. Carmen and I are actually advocating that GOP winning is good for solving back for things like sex trafficking. On the issue of the impacts, Our first internal link, he says that one, this doesn't make sense that John Boehner will pass immigration reform. It does make sense. This is the top of the docket when midterms are over, which means Boehner will agree to pass it. The only way you get border securitization is if Republicans win. If Republicans don't win, then Boehner will agree to any plan that's put out there, which would be a bill without border securitization, which means that you lead to the impacts of increasing sex trafficking because you don't have that militarization to solve back for that, and two, increasing border violence. GOP is the only way to solve back for this.
All right, we're gonna go quick overview on top. Can slow it. Advantage 2, disadvantage 2. Advantage 2 on the environment, disadvantage 2 on corporate inversion good, advantage 1 on jobs, and our tick scenario. And I will definitely post.
You can do that one more time.
Yeah, sure. Advantage 2 on the environment,
Okay,
our disadvantage 2 on corporate inversion,
awesome.
and their advantage 2, or advantage 1 on jobs,
Yep.
and the disadvantage on ticks. Cool. Everyone ready?
Yep.
There's going to be 2 key places that we are winning this debate scenario. One, when they don't analyze our links on advantage 2 and advantage 1, or our turn scenarios. And 2, when we say that our disadvantage is going to outweigh, even if you don't buy politics, we say that these scenarios are inevitable. So first, look at the issue of advantage 2. Circle everything Miranda said on this advantage. Specifically, I'll analyze what this means. So on this advantage on the environment, the only thing that Corey says, and don't let the PMR come up here and say all of a sudden we're going to solve back for, this isn't going to happen overseas. When we say that 1, this is already happening in the status quo, and 2, plan is only going to make it worse because they are going to move 50% of their company, all of a sudden they're still going to move their corporation to a different country, meaning that they're still going to cause these environmental impacts from happening. Also, extend across to Miranda's specific analysis. When she gives an analysis on Monsanto, she says that Monsanto is simply going to increase deforestation when they continue to move their businesses here. They're only going to move 20% here. All of a sudden, they evade taxes, and they're still going to cause deforestation in the region. If anything, plan makes it worse. On to the issue of the disadvantage too. On to the issue of disadvantage on corporation inversion, we are the only ones controlling the internal link scenario to poverty when they say that they are all of a sudden going to solve back for jobs. When we tell you that jobs are going to be cut if the plan passes because you are forcing this 35% corporate tax, which is going to be huge. We say that specific jobs are going to be cut in things like, in businesses like food operators, in businesses that actually employ a lot of these smaller jobs. We say that this is particularly crucial for things like poverty. Also, extend across our analysis on the medical companies. We are the only ones solving back for the prices of medical companies by allowing them to have their headquarters overseas. We see a decrease in prices, meaning that our impacts are more likely. We say that this is the only way that we can solve back for things like for solving back for code violations and things like health issues. Anything you want to add on that?
No.
On to the issue of advantage 1 on jobs. Now, this is exactly where our entire disadvantage contradicts this in its entirety. If you look at these 2 sheets of paper side by side, we are the only ones that are controlling the internal link by the term. Don't let the PMR get up here and say anything against this specific term. We say that this is going to lead to a collapse of jobs. You could circle out on your flow when this is the most likely thing in this round. When we say that when companies, we all agree that companies are greedy, meaning that these companies are going to cut jobs if they have to pay more taxes, meaning that plan is the only plan in this debate round that is going to force them to stay in the United States and force them to cut jobs. We say that this is the only, we say that the affirmative plan is never solving back for poverty at all. They have absolutely no magnitude to solving back or time frame to solving back for poverty. Anything you want to add?
No.
On to the issue of the disadvantage on politics. Corey makes a fundamental mistake when they don't answer this position correctly. This is another way out. If you don't buy any of our, if you don't buy the first, There's two ways to vote. On the first analysis, that they are solving for poverty, and two, on the disadvantage of politics. Look to where we tell you specifically in the links that this policy is about increases taxes, meaning that it's good for Democrats, meaning that if GOP doesn't, GOP won't win the majority, meaning that we don't get we don't get any type of border security. Again, look to where we say the border security is particularly crucial. The fallback for things like sex trafficking and border violence. We say that when they don't argue against our analysis, this is another easy way to weigh these impacts. Again, look to where we tell you. One, they aren't solving back for our return of poverty, and two, they are never solving back for border violence with plans. If anything, they are going to lead to more violence on the border and more people dying. We say that you're always preferring that analysis, Chris.
I will have an overview at the top, followed by advantage 1, advantage 2, I believe disadvantage 2, whatever politics was.
That was just saying. Politics was one.
All right, just add 1 and then just add 2. This is going to be an easy ballot for Nevada CN today because we can prove that we are going to keep both jobs and corporations within the United States. When my opponents failed to answer coming out of the PMC that our argument that corporations will not be able to move more than 50% of their corporate holdings outside of the United States because it would make it infeasible for them to participate in business in the US, they're never going to win. The example that proves this perfectly, they keep talking about food producers. It wouldn't be possible for Burger King to move more than 50% of its locations out of the US because they'd have to pretty conveniently move them away from their customers. They never answer this argument out of the PMC, and this is why my opponents are going to be losing the debate today, because we're going to be fundamentally controlling the link level of this debate. The only thing that we are at a propensity to solve is corporations hiding their tax revenue from the United States and putting it into other nations. Let's talk about this specifically on the jobs sheet right now. The first argument that I want to look to is at the uniqueness level, where my opponents are saying that this increase in 12,000 unemployment filings doesn't mean that people don't have jobs right now. But the important uniqueness argument is the one that they don't answer. That's what I read out of the PMC that says that the labor force participation rate right now is the lowest it's been in 36 years. For 3.5 decades, we haven't had this bad of unemployment. People simply don't have access to jobs right now. The only propensity that we have is to keep some in the United States. It is terminally low at this point. At the link level, the only argument that my opponents make is that companies are going to leave because of the 35% tax bracket. But they don't understand Corey's response, which is that there are corporate tax loopholes that alleviate this tax burden. Corey says the effective tax rate is between 16 and 17%, and that is competitive and will allow businesses to remain in the United States. Moreover, keep in mind, these are corporations that are already operating in the United States solvently. We're just trying to keep them from leaving for higher profits in other countries by passing this law. We are the only team that has a propensity to keep jobs in the United States as a result of this, and therefore have the only inroad to the jobs impacts, where both teams describe how bad it is to not have jobs in the United States. So where my opponents go for this on their second disadvantage about how corporate inversion is good, we have the more direct access to this argumentation because we are more likely to keep jobs in the US. Therefore, between advantage 1 and disadvantage 2, you're going to be preferring the affirmative team and giving an affirmative ballot. On to the environment. A couple of important arguments here. My opponent's first argument is that companies are going to be able to move at over 50% of corporate holdings. However, you can cross-apply from the solvency where this would be unreasonable because it means moving the mechanisms by which they generate revenue outside of the United States. You can't move away from your customer base and still have profit. Companies are able to do this right now because they only need to move 20% of their corporate holdings. So maybe having headquarters and a few supporting operations, they're able to get away from us. However, they aren't able to do this when we set the burden at 50% because they have to move the majority of their business away from their customer base, which is why this doesn't function. When my opponents fail to answer this, they're never going to be winning the debate today. Corey, do you want anything else on the sheet?
I don't think so.
On the college.
Just cross applications.
Right. Moreover, the rest of this is just cross applications. You can, again, cross-apply all of Corey's answers that have been made all over the debate. Let's talk about politics. The most important argument on this sheet is the one that they don't answer, where Corey tells you that Democrats are already going to win because they're outspending and out fundraising Republicans by 2 to 1 right now. They've already raised $62 million, where Republicans have only raised $31 million. This is particularly important when Corey tells you that 96% of elections can be predicted by the candidate that spends the most money in their campaign. My opponents don't answer this. This functions not only as a uniqueness argument, but also as a link argument. It says that Democrats are poised to win right now, and that Republicans won't be able to derail them simply by having a Democratic win. There is no explanation of how this is going to be able to overcome the funding barrier that Democrats have been able to put up. They have fundraised so much that Republicans will not be able to surpass them, meaning that there is no uniqueness to their impact scenario. If it is supposedly true that Boehner will allow Democrats to pass this, it is already going to happen right now and is not uniquely attached to the advocacy of the affirmative and not a reason to give a negative ballot. As an underview, when we subsume the impacts... What? I already subsumed the impacts there for you. When we subsume the impacts on their second disadvantage, and when there is no uniqueness story that explains why their first disadvantage makes sense, and we are winning the link to the jobs arguments, we have the largest impacts and the most probable impacts in the round. So you'll be voting here for Nevada CN.
So my first thought is that I think the politics dissat is kind of absurd, and for many reasons, but it's one of those, like, a butterfly flaps its wings in the House and all of a sudden everyone agrees on immigration reform. Like, I don't know, like, I think your non-unique argument at the end is enough for me to get out of this, but I think that the more, like, I don't know, and it's like, so that's, like, I think that you non-unique it very well at the end, and that's what I actually vote on, like, my actual thought in my head, without not if I was going to intervene, which I never would, but, like, I'm sitting here just as a critical thinker, like, thinking that, like, we have seen immigration deadlock for my entire life, and because of this one bill passing, all of a sudden, like, we're going to pass a conservative form of immigration or a liberal form, and all the Republicans and all the Democrats are going to suddenly agree and hold hands and sing Kumbaya. Like, that just seems silly to me. On the other hand, I also think that the environment advantage goes way undercovered by both teams, and really the only argument I get it out of the PMC and then out of the MOC, but otherwise, like, I just, like, in between, I have, like, so little ink on this. So really, it just comes down to, like, the first advantage and the second disadvantage, and who can control the jobs, right? Who's giving me more jobs here, and who's stopping poverty. Ultimately, I do think that the argument that this is, for most of at least the food companies, that it's totally infeasible for them to totally leave. I think you make that early on, you bring it back at the end. I'm beginning to buy that, and I also think that you never tell me that they're going to leave or that they're going to cut jobs because of this 35% rate, but I hear in both the last two speeches from the government that the actual rate is 16%. There are many loopholes, and that really mitigates them leaving or cutting jobs because of that. So then if I am getting more corporations staying here, paying taxes, creating jobs, contributing to the society, that's ultimately where I believe that the jobs are going to be, and how I'm going to stop poverty. So that's how I see the rounds.
Great. Thank you.
All right, thank you.